We are just doing Bible stories. Just. Sounds weird, doesn't it? I was with a group of guys this week, 15 guys in Wyoming, fly fishing and hanging out. It's a big table. We sat around every night and just talked. They would throw one question out and we just kind of go around the room, and it was just good to hang out with them and to remind them about the goodness of God, And it wasn't my event or anything like that, but we each had the opportunity to share, and so obviously I took that opportunity. I think one of the questions that was thrown out at us one night was, where do you need God to show up in your life? Where do you need God to show up in your life? And I was the last guy to answer the question. And doing chaplain work and crisis intervention, you end up in front of people who have either blown it or have had some kind of experience where crisis has occurred, death has occurred, and the question they always ask is, why did God do this? And so I find myself as a pastor, as a chaplain, constantly defending God. That if there is a God, there's also an evil that's out there as well, and you can't blame everything on God. God's a good God, and so defending God, he doesn't need me to defend him. I don't need to defend him, but I end up doing it because I know who he is for me and what he does for people that are in crisis. And so I kind of explained myself as I can't answer that question because God's always there. It's just a matter of, can I see what God's doing? That's more of the question. Can I see the presence of God because he's here? Like before we even walked in this room this morning, he was here. So I'm not waiting for God to show up. He's with me, he's with you. And we find that in this story this morning as we teach a Bible story. We're going to pick up in Genesis chapter 18. We're still talking about Abraham. Some crazy, wicked stories here. The Lord appeared to Abraham at the oaks of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance of his tent during the heat of the day. Let me take you back to the map and show you exactly where we are. If you remember, his home was up in Haran, which was up there, way up north of Syria. And the Lord took him away from his family and brought him down to the land that was promised to him. And he ended up going down to Negev, which was down here near Egypt. But then he ended up back up here near Hebron. Hebron's just west of the Dead Sea. And then let me show you some other things because we get into this story later on. That north of the, go back that one. Just north of Hebron is Jerusalem. Bethlehem is probably about 9 miles south of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem's kind of at the north point of the Dead Sea, but west of the Dead Sea. It's kind of important for you to know where Jerusalem is. And then Zor is this little city that's at the south end of the Dead Sea. But, okay, now go to the next one. So here's Zor. We're zoomed into this map right here. Hebron is where Abraham is. And then over here on the east side of the Dead Sea is Jordan. This is Sodom. This is Gomorrah. What we believe to be ancient Sodom, ancient Gomorrah, because they get wiped off the map. So that kind of gives you an idea. Abraham is over here. Lot, remember, they split up, and Lot went across the Dead Sea to the Jordan area. He took all his family and sheep and everything that he owned over there because there wasn't enough space for him over on the east side, supposedly. So now Abraham is there, Mamre, in the Hebron area south of Jerusalem. And it says, he looked up and he saw 3 men standing near him. 3 men, that's how it's described. It's just, they look like, I guess, normal men. But they were somewhat attractive. There was something about them that caused them to be attractive, and you'll figure that out in this story. And one of them, as we read this story, is the angel of Yahweh. Yahweh comes to earth, and we believe that that's Jesus, but this is seen as a man. This is seen as a man. It doesn't say it's Jesus. It just says that it's an angel, so we assume it's the angel of Yahweh. It says, when Abraham saw them, he ran from the entrance of the tent to meet them, bowed to the ground and said, "My Lord," like he recognized. Like he looks at the 3 men and he says to one of them, "My Lord." Like he's had some kind of experience in the past with him, obviously, because he's already spoken to him in Genesis chapter 17. We went back to that. Said that you're going to have a baby in many nations. Chapter 15, he promised him in the covenant. He's had an experience with God. So he recognizes him and says, "My Lord, if I found favor with you, please do not go on past your servant. Let a little water be brought that you may wash your feet and rest yourselves under the tree. I will bring a bit of bread so that you may strengthen yourselves. This is why you have passed your servant's way. Later, you could continue on." He's like, "Just, Lord, sit here a while with your compadres, and I'll take care of you." And they say, "Yes," they replied, "do as you have said." So Abraham hurried into the tent and said to Sarah, "Quick, knead 3 measures of fine flour, make bread." How many of you have ever done that? "Hey, honey, I've got somebody coming home. I need you to fix a meal." I did that to my wife on Friday. Like literally, we're trying to get home from Billings, and Jim was graciously going to fly up to Minnesota and get me and bring me home. And one of the guys was going to fly with me. And I'm like, he's going to stay with us. Michelle was flying home from Tulsa that day, so she wasn't even home. So if you know my wife, that causes a freak out moment for a minute that somebody's coming to stay at my house and I'm not even there to get it ready. But this is exactly what Abraham's done. He's gone in and said, "Make some bread," which would have been unleavened bread because it didn't have time to rise. It says, Abraham ran to the herd and got a tender choice calf. He gave it to a young man who hurried to prepare it. Like literally, you're going to get a live animal and he's going to butcher it. Then Abraham took curds and milk as well as the calf that he had prepared. How long did this take? They're literally sitting under the tree waiting for Abraham, all that he promised him, but you're literally going outside to kill the calf, to butcher the calf, to cook the calf, to bake the bread, to milk the cows. It's obviously taking some time. It says, as well as the calf that he prepared and set them before the men, he served them as they ate under the tree. So now we have angels, these men eating, physically eating. Verse 9, it says, "Where's your wife Sarah?" They asked him. He said, "Lord," right? He said, "Lord." He knows this is the Lord, yet the men ask him, "Well, where's Sarah?" That's just like when Adam and Eve were hiding in the garden because they had sinned and they were naked. And he's like, "Where are you?" God didn't already know. When Cain killed Abel and God asked Cain, he's like, "Where's Abel?" Didn't God already know what had occurred, that Cain had killed Abel? "There in the tent," he answered. "There in the tent behind me," he answered. What does "in the tent" mean? Like, can she hear? Can she see what's going on? Does she see these three men? Doesn't say. It says, the Lord said, "I will certainly come back to you in about a year's time, and your wife Sarah will have a son." How old is Sarah at this point? Old. Over 90 years old. Abraham, we know, is already like 100 years old. Now Sarah was listening at the entrance of the tent behind him. It doesn't say that she was hiding. It doesn't say that. You kind of get the idea of that when they ask, where is she? Because she is either visible or she's not. But now she's standing at the entrance of the tent, and she's listening to what they have to say. Abraham and Sarah were old and getting on in years. Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. So she laughed to herself. She laughed to herself. Was that a visible laugh? Was that a... What was that she did? And she said to herself, "After I'm worn out and my Lord is old, will I have delight?" Like there was a joy in having children. Will I be ever delighted in having my own child? You sit there and you think, as you try to make this picture come alive, what was that laugh? Was that a laugh of doubt? You know, like, like sure. Was it a cynical laugh? Or was it actually a laugh of delight? What was it? We don't know. You think it was delight?
That's my vote.
That's your vote? I think so. But like, at this point, it says, but the Lord asked Abraham, why did Sarah laugh? Remember, Sarah laughed to herself. But the Lord said, why did Sarah laugh? How did he know that she laughed? Why did Sarah laugh, saying, "Can I really have a baby when I'm old? Is anything impossible for the Lord?" And here we go. If this is the Lord saying this, is he defending himself? Like I was saying earlier, sitting with these guys, you know, it's like, why do we put limitations on God? Here's the Lord saying, do you not think that the Lord is capable of doing this? Do you not think that I'm capable of doing this? I mean, he's literally questioning what their faith is at this point. But again, when he says that, when he says that this is going to happen, he's building confidence in the same time in their faith. Like, Abraham knew that he was promised a son in many nations back in Genesis chapter 15. Yet it wasn't going to come through Hagar and Ishmael. Well, how's this going to happen? How's this going to happen? I'm old. Can't do this. We can't reproduce. If the Lord could read Sarah's thoughts, her laughter, her thoughts, could he not also open her womb? Absolutely. We should never, ever doubt the promises of God, because nothing is impossible for him. At the appointed time, I will come back to you. In about a year, she will have a son. And Sarah denied it. She's like, I didn't laugh. Like she knew she laughed to herself. She said because she was afraid, but he replied, no, you did laugh. Wouldn't you have liked to seen that confrontation? I didn't laugh, she says to the Lord. Oh, yes, you did laugh. What do you say? Oh, sorry. The men got up from there and looked over Sodom, and Abraham was walking with them to see them off. Then the Lord said, should I hide what I'm about to do from Abraham? Like, this next story that we're going into, should I actually tell him? Abraham is to become a great and powerful nation, Lord still speaking, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed through him. For I have chosen him so that he will command his children and his house after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just. This would be the old covenant that Matt was talking about. You do these things, you'll be blessed. You don't do these things, you'll be cursed. This is how the Lord will fulfill to Abraham what he promised him. Now, those words right there, we're not sure that Abraham heard those words because he was walking with the other two men. But obviously, Moses is the one that recorded Genesis, we believe. So God gave these words to Moses, these direct words. Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is immense, and their sin is extremely serious. I will go down to see if what they have done justifies the cry that has come up to me. If not, I will find out. God is a just God. The men turned from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. So there's three of them there. There's the angel of the Lord, and there's those two other men. The angel of the Lord stays with Abraham, and the other two men leave and head towards Sodom, which, back on the map, you saw they had to go around the Dead Sea. The men turned from there and went towards Sodom, while Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Abraham stepped forward and said, will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? That's an important question for you to remember right there. Will you really sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you really sweep it away instead of sparing the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people who are in it? Like the Lord said, man, it is so nasty bad in that area east of the Dead Sea that I'm just going to wipe it off the map. It's that bad. We already saw the destruction because of sin with Noah and just taking all of humanity off except for Noah and his family. And he promised he wouldn't do it by flood anymore. But now he's literally talking about wiping this area out where Lot lives. Where Lot lives. And Abraham knows that Lot lives there, his nephew. You could not possibly do such a thing to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. You could not possibly do that. Now Abraham's telling God what he can and can't do. Like there's righteous people there. You can't just delete them. Won't the judge of the whole earth do what is just? The Lord said, if I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. So the question I ask you is, just who is Abraham trying to save? Is he trying to save the city? Or is he just trying to save the righteous people that are in the city? It's obviously important to him. Then Abraham answered, since I have ventured to speak to my Lord, even though I am dust and ashes, he knows who he is in the physical realm. This body goes back to the dust eventually. Suppose 50 righteous lack 5. Will you destroy the whole city for lack of 5? He replied, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. Then he spoke again, suppose 40 are found there. He answered, I will not do it on account of 40. Then he said, let my Lord not be angry. Let me speak further. Let me keep going. Suppose 30 are found there. He answered, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Then he said, since I ventured to speak to my Lord, suppose 20 are found there. He replied, I will not destroy it on account of 20. Then he said, let my Lord not be angry, and I will speak one more time. I can name that tune in 3 notes. Suppose 10 are found there. He answered, I will not destroy it on account of 10. Evidently, Abraham's satisfied with 10. Surely there's 10 righteous people there. So he's going to save the whole city because yeah, there's got to be 10 there. And he's literally seeking clarification from God as, what is the extent of your mercy? How merciful are you? Will you do it for just 10? He wanted to find out before he judged Sodom. When the Lord had finished speaking with Abraham, he departed, and Abraham returned to his place. Now, I'm not going to read to you Genesis chapter 19, but let me rusty paraphrase it. These two men, the angels, they get to Sodom and they find Lot there. Lot sitting at the city gate, which is kind of like the city court for us. Lot was considered the leader of that whole city. And he saw these two men come, and he immediately says, please come to my place and stay at my place. And they're like, no, we're just going to stay here in the city. And he's like, no, 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 no. He's like, you need to come to my house. Like Lot knew that this place was a hole. So he literally takes these two men to his house. It's probably fortified some way because he's the leader. And he begins to feed them dinner. Comes nighttime, and it says in the scripture that the whole population of men of Sodom came to Lot's house because they wanted to have sex with the two men. Here's where it gets really weird, if that's not weird enough for you. Lot believes that these men are from God. They're angels of God. And he comes outside the door and he's like, I don't know how he does this. He's like, you can't have these two men. But I have two virgin daughters, and you can do whatever you want with them. I don't know how you do that. Unless you're trusting the Lord with all your heart. Like, that's a wicked, wicked story. I think Lot knew. I think Lot knew that he was going to protect, that God was going to protect his family because of his faithfulness, because of his righteousness. So then what happens? The men come charging to the house, and the two men cause them to become blind that they can't find the entrance of the house. Like, now God is protecting Lot and his daughters, who he was willing to give up. That's a trust factor. And these two men, they immediately go to the fiancés, boyfriends of the daughters, and say, hey, you've got to get out of town with us. We're leaving. God's telling you to get up and leave. And they don't believe him, and they stay behind, the two fiancés. Then literally these two men come back to Lot's house and almost forcefully take Lot, his wife, and his two daughters out of the town and tell them that they are to go up into the mountains to protect themselves. And Lot's like, I can't. I'm too old to go up into the mountains. I can't go up to the mountains. Let me go down to that little town in the Zoar and just let me stay there. And they agreed to let him stay in Zoar. So they leave and they say, don't look back, don't look back. Just keep going to Zoar. And as they leave, and it's clear that they've left, Lot, his wife, and his two daughters, hell, fire, brimstone comes raining down on Sodom and Gomorrah. The smell of sulfur comes raining down on these two cities and totally destroys them. Burnt. Wiped out. Yet for some reason, Lot's wife retreated and went back. It says she turned towards Sodom and was turned into a pillar of salt. In other words, the fire got her. She was consumed by the fire and the sulfur. Lot's wife was consumed in the same judgment as the rest of Sodom and Gomorrah. You talk about the seriousness of sin and what is sin. And that is one of the passages of Scripture. I tell it to you because some of you will go back and actually read it to see if I'm telling you the truth, and I hope that you do. I hope that you do. But the seriousness and the whole idea of homosexuality that was going on in Sodom and Gomorrah, it is where we get our word sodomy now. It's not like it was named Sodom after that. It literally comes from that. So for people to say that's not what they were trying to do, it's obviously that the world believes that's what they're trying to do because they've named it that. But for God to be just and to wipe that out, yet he saved the righteous. He saved the righteous. He came through for Lot. Go back and read it, Genesis chapter 19. I'm going to bump forward now to Genesis chapter 21. The Lord came to Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age at the appointed time God had told him a year later. Abraham named his son who was born to him, the one Sarah bore to him, not Hagar, but to Sarah, Isaac, which means son of laughter. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him. Remember that? That goes back to Genesis chapter 17. As God had commanded him, Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has made me laugh, and everyone who hears will laugh with me. We're some 3,000 years later, and we're still like going, what in the world? She also said, who would have told Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? She's actually nursing at 100 years old. Yet I have borne a son for him in his old age. Move forward. Last story this morning is Genesis chapter 22. After these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. God tested Abraham. I don't think God tests us anymore. I don't. Some people believe that he does, but I don't believe that he does. I believe we live in a fallen world, and we're susceptible to the consequences of our decisions and other people's decisions around us. But in this case, God was telling Abraham all these different things to do. And you can look at it as a test. There was the test when he told him to pack up from Haran and go down to the land of Canaan. Oh, well, okay, I'm moving my stuff and going to a place that I don't even know. And then there was the whole famine. When the famine hit the land of Canaan, he's like, okay, now I got to go down to Egypt and survive in Egypt because there's plenty of food down there. There was that test. Then there was the test where when they moved back into the land of Canaan and him and Lot had too much and too little of land, that they had to be separated. That God said, okay, now you got to separate from your family, and Lot went over to Jordan. There's that test. Then there was the test when Lot got taken into captivity by the Mesopotamian kings and taken up north, and Abraham had to get his men together and go up and rescue Lot. There was that test. There was the test when they came back with all the loot from up there and everything, and it was all given to Abraham. He's like, no, I don't need this. I don't need this. You men take what you need and just it was the whole trusting the Lord with fortune. And then there's the test of parenthood. Like, is this really going to happen? Am I really going to be a parent? Am I really going to be a father? Am I really going to have many nations under me? There's that test. And then there's the last test before this one is send Ishmael and Hagar away. Like his son was sent away from him. You can't tell me that Abraham wasn't tested in his life. He was tested throughout his life. And after these things, God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. And he's like, here I am. Here I am one more time. What now? What's next, God? What's next? Take your son. He said, your only son Isaac. This is the son that they've been waiting for. This all their life they've been waiting to be parents, and he finally gets this son that is going to be the father of many nations. Your only son Isaac, whom you love, go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains I will tell you about. What? What? 100 years old. He's probably past that age now because his son is younger and it's his only son. I'm supposed to offer my son as a sacrifice. Really? Okay. I mean, how long did it take for him to say okay? I mean, if I'm offering up my son Corey, I'm like, ooh, I need to sleep on that one. It looks like he did. So Abraham got up early in the morning, saddled his donkey, and took with him 2 of his young men and his son Isaac. He split wood for a burnt offering and set out to go to a place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance, top of this mountain. Let me give you some insight. This mountain is in Jerusalem. This mountain is in the Temple Mount of where the temple was built. Currently, the Dome of the Rock sits on top of this mountaintop by the Muslims. Like, remember, Ishmael came from Abraham, and this is a holy place. And this is where a mosque now sits on the top of this mountain. You get the picture. It says, then Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The boy and I will go over there to worship, and then we'll come back to you. In other words, the 2 guys aren't seeing what's going on. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and laid it on his son Isaac. In his hand he took the fire and the knife, and the 2 of them walked on together. If you're Isaac, what are you thinking? He's carrying the wood. We're going to worship the Lord with my dad. We're going to make an offering, a sacrifice. This is going to be a special moment. Then Isaac spoke to his father Abraham and said, my father. And he replied, here I am, my son. Isaac said, the fire and the wood are here, but where's the lamb for the burnt offering? Didn't have a clue. Abraham answered him, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. Then the 2 of them walked on together. When they arrived at the place that God had told them about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood. At what point He bound his son Isaac and placed him on the altar on top of the wood. I have no idea what that looked like. Was Isaac fighting it? Was it a terrible situation, or was Isaac going, I trust you? It doesn't say. He placed them on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out and took the knife to slaughter his son. This is trauma for a kid, right? It's trauma. What are you doing, Dad? But an angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. Like, he's ready to slice his throat, his own son's throat, and he gets called out. He replied, here I am. Drop the knife. Here I am. He said, do not lay a hand on the boy or do anything to him, for now I know that you fear God, and since you have not withheld your only son from me, like his only son. How hard was Abraham's faith in God? Like, God, you promised that there were going to be many nations from me. And if this is my only son, you're either going to kill him right here and it's going to be a sweet sacrifice, but you're going to have to raise him from the dead because you made this promise to me. I don't know what's about to happen right here, but you promised. And it's through faith that he took the knife and began to do this sacrifice, but he's quickly stopped. He says, Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in the thicket by its thorns. He's like, oh, okay. You imagine your heart rate, and then just immediately it comes down when you go, I get it. God's showing up one more time. He's doing his thing. He said, so Abraham went and took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in the place of his son. That's the first really explicit mention in the Bible of a substitutionary sacrifice, one life for another. That's the first time. Think about that for a second. The first time one life given for another life. It was his only son. Sounds familiar. And Abraham named that place, the Lord will provide. So today it is said, it will be provided by the Lord's mountain. The same place that Solomon built the temple of God. The same place. The exact same place where the Holy of Holies was built. Where Abraham was about to sacrifice his son. And in the Holy of Holies, there's this big veil that separated the rest of the world except for the only high priest that could go behind the Holy of Holies one day a year. And on the day that Jesus was sacrificed nearby on a cross, that veil was torn from the top to the bottom. Basically saying, you now, my friends, are the Holy of Holies. What Jesus has done by dying on the cross, his blood being poured out for the forgiveness of sins, not just the atonement of sins, but the forgiveness of sins, that all sin is taken away. And he raised up from dead, went to heaven, and they sent this Spirit to live inside of us, and we have direct access to the Holy of Holies right here in us. And he's literally saying, it will be provided on the Lord's mountain. Abraham named the place, the Lord will provide. He has provided for you sitting in these very seats right here. You don't need a high priest. You don't need to go to the priest. to ask for forgiveness. You have already been forgiven. You have everything that you need. The Lord has provided once more, and he provided right there in that very same place. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, this is the Lord's declaration, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your only son. Your only son. I will indeed bless you and make your offspring as numerous as the stars of the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your offspring will possess the city gates of their enemies, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by your offspring, because you have obeyed my command. Abraham went back to his young men, those 2 men he left behind, and they got up and they went together to Beersheba, and Abraham settled in Beersheba. That, my friends, is some wild stories. But here's what I know from reading them. My God is a just God, and my God is a faithful God. And whatever he promises, he will do. Whatever he promises, he will do. Every promise that is in this book right here has been or will be fulfilled by him. There's nothing that hasn't been already. I trust him. These are the stories. As we read these stories, we understand how faithful our God is. That he's always present, always with us, always loves us. He's a good God. Father, my prayer is that you will allow these stories to come alive, even as they go home and they read them themselves, that may you cause them to understand and be real to them. I thank you for my brothers and sisters that are sitting here today, that we can just love one another, know that you're present here with us, and we can enjoy the fellowship of one another and the fellowship of you with us. And we are thankful for that. And I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.